The day I found out I was pregnant sold babe in one of the most important days of my life, but instead, it was the day my mom told me to leave. He never thought a stick wrapped in plastic would determine the next 4 years of my life, but once the pregnancy test showed 2 lines, the silence in the room grew louder than I could stand. He sat in the bathroom, holding it like it might vanish if I blinked too hard. He wasn't scared at first, just stunned, like the air had changed forever. He knew my boyfriend was already gone for a job up north, but I believed my mother, the one person I had lived with my whole life, would understand. I rehearsed how I'd tell her, calmly, maturely, like a responsible adult. When I finally did, she looked at me without blinking, turned off the stove, and shut her bedroom door. The next morning, she refused to speak to me, no questions asked, no speech, just distance. He ate toast. She made eggs and didn't they offer me any. That same afternoon she said in a flat tone, I won't be supporting you through this. You have to leave. Nothing else. That was the moment I realized I had no backup. No net. No plan. So I tried to act fast, thinking she'd change her mind after cooling off. But she didn't. I packed slowly, hoping she'd step in at the last second. She didn't. He messaged my boyfriend, but he didn't have housing either. When I left with 2 trash bags and a phone at 14%, I realized pregnancy wasn't just about diapers. It was about survival. Before I even got to a bench, I wrote down the date and took a photo of my things outside our apartment door. I told myself I needed evidence, not because I was mad, but because something told me that later, someone might not believe this happened. Telling my mom I was pregnant felt like confessing to a crime. I'm not sure what I expected her to say besides maybe confusion or concern, but her lack of any reaction made everything worse. She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't show shock. She simply turned and left the room, and I remember hearing her door lock. At first, I told myself she just needed time to process it. Maybe it was a lot to handle. He gave her space that evening. The next morning, I made coffee and set out 2 mugs, trying to make things feel normal. She walked out, looked away, and made her own, ignoring mine. That was the first sign that I wasn't wrong, something had shifted. On the 3rd day, she said I had until the weekend to move out. Not let's talk, not what's your plan. Just a deadline. No reasoning, no compromise. He asked where she expected a pregnant daughter to go. She said flatly, that's not my problem. It didn't make sense. He wasn't on drugs. He wasn't irresponsible. He hadn't stolen anything from her. He was just pregnant. Her sudden emotional detachment almost made me think maybe he dreamed the comfort we used to share. He tried calling my aunt, no answer. 2 cousins read my messages and didn't respond. He felt myself emotionally shutting down out of protection. So, I started documenting. He screenshotted conversations, I recorded voice notes of my own thoughts, and I took pictures of the calendar and boxes. Not as proof for today, but because I already sensed that no one would believe these years from now unless I had something to show. He didn't cry in front of her. He held my stomach and told myself quietly, this child needs someone who won't walk out. The day my mom set my things outside was colder than I expected. It wasn't dramatic or loud, just laughless. He came home from a walk trying to clear my head, and there they were, my 2 black duffel bags, a box of folded clothes, and a paper grocery bag with random toiletries stuffed inside. No note. No good key. My key didn't work. She had changed the lock. He stood there with the wind hitting my back, trying to process it without letting my heart collapse. He took out my phone and snapped a picture for my own records, timestamped and geotagged. He didn't cry or knock. He knew the decision was final. He walked to the end of our street and stood under the bus stop sign, not to wait for the bus but just for the illusion of shelter. He used a free Wi-Fi signal from a nearby cafe to search for local shelters. The wait lists were long. Most were full. He found one location with a small intake window from 7-8 p.m., no guarantees. He mapped out walking directions, just under 4 miles. He gave myself time to rest and started walking with both bags on each shoulder. Never in my life had I felt more disposable. But something inside me hardened in those hours, like some part of me realized this was going to take everything I had. He arrived sweaty and exhausted, but calm. The intake worker looked at me and asked, "Are you using?" He shook my head and showed her my pregnancy test photos and OB appointment card. She nodded, handed me forms, told me to sit down. As I completed the intake paperwork, I wrote everything using block letters. This wasn't going to be an emotional journey. It would have to be a documented one. That first night sleeping in a shelter was colder than the air outside. It wasn't about temperature. It was about the chill of being truly alone, surrounded by others who were all emotionally done too. The cot they gave me was metal framed and creaked every time I shifted. The room had 5 other women, nobody talked much. One of them, an older woman named Trish, handed me a pair of socks and said, "Don't let them see you cry. They treat you like you're not ready." I took the socks, grateful, and nodded silently. It all felt unreal, like I had arrived in a world that was happening just a foot away from normal life. Dinner had ended before I got there, but someone slid me an apple and a slice of bread. He ate it without shame. He was pregnant and needed calories. He set my paperwork under my pillow and kept my Idaho close. My phone had 9% battery left, so I turned it off. He didn't want texts from anyone right now. He just wanted silence that wasn't suffocating. There were noises through the night, someone coughing, someone crying in a stall, someone arguing with her boyfriend on speakerphone. But mostly, it was quiet. That scary, haunting kind of quiet. He didn't sleep much. He wrapped my hoodie around my stomach and whispered to the child inside me that he'd figure it out. I didn't know how or when, but giving up wasn't on the table. He made a mental note. I would log everything. Every night here. Every meeting. Every person. Not for revenge. For the record. Because I realized that nobody would do it for me, and someday I might need to prove that I showed up to survive every single day. The intake process was more detailed than I expected. After the overnight stay, I was assigned a number, not a nickname or code name, just a number tied to my file. The woman at the desk asked me to repeat my name and date of birth 5 times to match records, then asked if I was in immediate danger. He wasn't being chased. He was just evicted without notice while pregnant. That, apparently, didn't count as a direct threat, but it still went on record. She recorded my pregnancy using a visual verification form with the nurse on duty. He handed over copies of the 2 test photos, plus the scheduled OB confirmation visit in 2 weeks. She stapled everything. She asked for my family contact, and I said I had no one I was willing to list. She didn't flinch. They heard it all before. A small binder with shelter policies was handed to me: quiet hours, curfews, security checkpoints, prohibited visitors. He read it carefully and initialed each section. Michelle, the caseworker I was assigned, introduced herself around 10 de la mañana, direct but not cold. She had sharp eyes and a clipboard and said, "Don't worry, we'll work on options, not just pity." That sentence made me trust her. She made a list of what they need in the next few weeks: vouchers for maternity clothes from donations, an appointment with intake social services, and a housing program rep who visited once a month. The daytime coordinator gave me a brown tote bag with basic hygiene kits. A nurse checked my vitals, and for the first time in days someone touched my wrist without judgment. Blood pressure was high, but not dangerous yet. He was told to rest. He didn't. Instead, I found a quiet hallway and wrote down everything, every name, every moment, every rule, in my notebook. Being pregnant in a shelter didn't earn you special treatment. That was clear within days. My assigned bed was next to the bathroom, and sometimes I'd wake up to someone arguing loudly or trying to sneak in past curfew. But I pushed through, focusing on health appointments Michelle arranged. Pregnancy while homeless is labeled high risk by the clinic, so I got a few additional screenings and was able to register for Medicaid with Michelle's help. She also guided me toward WIC benefits, which allowed me to get basic groceries, milk, cereal, some produce. The midwife who worked with us came Wednesdays and Fridays. She asked simple, clear questions, never smiled too much or too little. She told me plainly, stress like yours spikes complications. You don't get a do-over if you ignore this. So I took her seriously. I drank water, learned to meditate in the stairwell, and walked during quiet hours to stretch my legs. At night, I journaled symptoms and mood just like the clinic told me to. I logged heartburn, back itches, dreams, mild cramps. I started stapling my clinic printouts into a folder. No one told me to do that, I just knew I had to keep my own evidence, in my hands, not just digitally. Hostile stares came from other residents sometimes, maybe because I was quiet, maybe because I looked young, maybe because getting prenatal help implied I was being taken care of when we were all struggling. I didn't engage with rumors or stories. I stayed on routine, stayed polite, kept things brief. Michelle noticed and told me, courts love logs more than feelings. Stay consistent. He never forgot that. This wasn't just about what Ida lived through, it was about what I'd need to explain, prove, and back up later when the system asked, "What kind of mother are you?" Labor began on a cold January night when the laundry room pipe burst and flooded part of the floor. He was sitting in the common lounge, timing contractions, not wanting to sound dramatic. Micheje was off that night, but the head resident notified staff, and I was taken by ambulance after a nurse confirmed I was dilated. He went alone. No family. No friend. When I arrived, I gave the nurse my proof of insurance, updated pregnancy checkups, and notebook. Yes, even in labor, I carried it. It calmed me to know I was documented. Sarah Grace was born at 2:34 de la mañana during a heavy snowfall. I didn't cry during delivery. He cried afterward, in silence, when they placed her on my chest and she blinked against the lights. For 36 hours, I stayed in recovery. No one visited. No flowers, no balloons, no name announcements. He named her myself. He filled out the birth certificate with my full name as the sole parent. No father listed. No emergency contacts. The nurse double-checked before finalizing the form. He said, "No mistake. Used me." Everything was quiet in the discharge process except a kind social worker who offered a ride back to the shelter. He accepted. Holding Zara in my lap, I returned to a world that still smelled like bleach and trauma, but now held the tiniest reason to rebuild each part of who I was. He slept with her next to me, wrapped in donated blankets. Every call, every sigh, every small curl of her fingers reminded me of what I could no longer afford to complain about. He was now a mother. That didn't just change my title, it changed how closely I paid attention to every inch of paperwork, every policy I had to follow, every step of re-entry into stability. 3 months after Zara was born, Michelle scheduled a custody consultation through a legal aid program that visited once a season. He was told point-blank that even without the father on record, without custody papers, old family members could later pull legal tricks, ask for guardianship, claim neglect, or raise doubts due to my shelter status. Micheje emphasized, the earlier you file for physical and legal custody, the stronger your case down the line. He remembered those words clearly the day we filled out the forms. It was more paperwork in the already heavy folder I carried around like a second diaper bag. He had to list my income, zero. My housing, transitional. My emergency plan, still in the works. But I had documentation of target effort, job applications, parenting class logs, every pediatric visit with Zara listed in time order. The lawyer glanced through it and said, "You've been doing more than most seated parents." That gave me quiet validation. Waiting 2 weeks, the paperwork filing came back stamped. He was granted temporary sole physical and legal custody pending a formal review after permanent housing placement. That didn't scare me. I was ready to track everything, meet all checkpoints. Micheje helped me mail notarized copies to a secure record storage address, just in case. He was even advised to set 2 passwords on my phone and scan key documents into cloud storage. He followed every step. This wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. Because even if my mother did nothing now, the wrong time could bring the wrong claim. I wouldn't confront her, I wouldn't post online, and I wouldn't let others define my intentions as unstable. I knew the system only values one thing, proof over pain. So that's what I built. Quietly. Every day. Without needing validation from voices that once left me outside in the cold. Every day after Zara turned 6 months old, I forced structure into our lives like it was medicine. He got up with her at sunrise, used donated baby food vouchers, bathed her using schedules taped to the sink, and started applying for every housing and work program Michelle could find. It wasn't glamorous, it was clockwork survival. Eventually, I was placed into a low-lift job program where I cleaned 2 public buildings after hours, about 5 hours a night, minimum wage, but steady. The work was hard on my body, but it let me start stacking pay stubs as evidence of effort. Each stub was photocopied and labeled, every daycare check-in logged. Micheje created what she called a proactive paper trail. He followed it to the letter. The court didn't care if I was trying, they cared about receipts, documents, logs. I learned to track Sarah's diaper changes, vaccination visits, and nighttime wake-ups not just for her development, but in case the day came when a lawyer questioned my capability. Some mothers laughed at how obsessive Ida become, but I wasn't trying to impress anyone, I was fighting a hidden battle. He knew that effort wouldn't guarantee safety, but it gave me readiness. The more prepared I became, the less fear controlled me. Late at night, I would lie awake and whisper promises to Zara about a kitchen of our own, a door we could lock from the inside, a mailbox with our name on it. I never let myself dream too far ahead, because timelines move slow when you're at the bottom of the system. What mattered was showing consistency. Not dramatic goals, just non-stop follow-through. And it worked. Over time, Michelle mentioned they moved to the front of the housing opportunity waitlist. He didn't celebrate. He printed the email and filed it. The message came on a Wednesday, the kind of unremarkable, ordinary day where nothing emotional should happen. He was feeding Zara squash puree when my phone buzzed. A Facebook notification. The name on the screen made my stomach tighten instantly. It was from my mother, after nearly 2 years of complete silence. All it said was, "I'd like to see my granddaughter." No apology. No explanation. No memory of how I ended up sleeping in a flooded shelter while pregnant because of her decision. I stared at the screen while my heartbeat increased, not out of fear, but out of restraint. I knew I couldn't respond emotionally. Micheji had once told me, when they circle back, don't meet them where they left you. Meet them where you've grown. He took a screenshot and sent it to her immediately. No response was sent from me. Micheji advised I establish written boundaries only through official letters or legal notices. I wasn't required to justify my silence. No one could force a reunion. But I also knew my mother's interest could grow into something more legally antagonistic if I didn't prepare. So, I began to gather every piece of documentation from day one onward: support communications, denied visitor logs, evidence of no contact. He even requested archive housing arrival forms. Not out of spite, but because rebuilding without proof meant vulnerability. Photographs, records, emails, all saved. He saw this for what it was, a possible manipulation attempt wrapped in family words. Her message didn't move me. It motivated me to solidify everything they quietly built. I wrote in a notebook that night, emotional reentry is not a sign of guilt, it's strategy cloaked in familiarity. It was a warning I chose not to ignore. He closed the app and returned to feeding my daughter. She deserved all of my energy, not distractions from someone who they left. A week after that message, I met with Michelle and we drafted a formal communication plan, nothing informal, nothing reactive. Everything documented, everything duplicable. We composed a cold, calm statement, acknowledgement received. All further communication may proceed via written formal channels only. Please address any legal intent through verified statements. It wasn't kind. It wasn't cruel. It was professional. That was the entire goal. I didn't need my mother's apology, and I certainly didn't need her drama. He needed her off record unless she wanted to go through the appropriate system. That was control reclaimed. I didn't put her on blast on social media, didn't tell friends, didn't ask anyone to side with me. He just waited. And weeks went by. 10 months. No further response came. That alone told me what I needed to know. The message hadn't been about reconciliation, it was likely about curiosity, guilt, or strategy. Maybe even an attempt to lay early groundwork for future involvement. But I didn't take the bait. He kept living my routine, daycare logs, work shifts, pediatric reports, every phone call with support saved in cloud storage. In between, I studied common tactics used in contested custody or late-stage family disruptions. He learned which arguments courts value and which ones don't. He learned that silence and maturity often win more than tears and outrage. He carried no desire for revenge. He desired peace. Protection. Paperwork. Facts over feelings. But that come didn't mean I forgot. He built a folder. A firewall. An invisible layer of safety dating back to the moment I walked out carrying 2 trash bags. Because if she ever stepped into any sort of hearing and claimed concern, I could open that folder without raising my voice. In a world stacked against single mothers, invisible armor is built with proof. Sarah turned 3, and with that came preschool interviews. He walked into the first one holding a portfolio of scanned health records, immunization charts, speech development reports, and even a housing eligibility form, just in case they asked. What I wasn't expecting was the question halfway through the meeting, so why aren't there any emergency family contacts on file? He paused. He could have given 5 emotional reasons, but I didn't. He simply said, we are establishing an independent household. Documentation is consistent, and care is uninterrupted. He watched the school director absorb my answer. That was enough. Safe words. Neither defensive nor wounded. It taught me again that in rebuilding life, people evaluate more than facts, they evaluate tone. If you sound emotional, they worry. If you sound scripted, they question truth. But if you sound composed and factual, they lean into trust. He got better with each interview. Default it to proof. Memorized the names of every contact who ever supported me, even if they were just shelter providers or pediatricians. That became my extended network, and it was enough. He overheard another parent say, I'd never enroll my kid somewhere without a real family to back me. He didn't engage. I repeated my method, highlight education, stay on track, reform bias through evidence. That's how I got us in, not through soft stories or sympathy. Through clarity. Through demonstrated effort. Through written schedules, eye contact, and silence in the right places. I never allowed myself to explain abandonment again. It was no longer relevant. Her absence wasn't my failure, it was my space to grow. My focus stayed on Sarah's needs and shaping how the world would assess me as a provider. Not rescued, not broken. Prepared. Nothing more. Nothing less. That was the version I showed publicly, privately, and permanently. A letter arrived in a plain white envelope with the kind of stamp you pause over before opening. It was from County Family Court. My mother had filed for supervised visitation rights. No notice, no outreach beforehand. Used a formal motion. Micheji and I met that afternoon, and she was already 3 steps ahead. We need to prepare the full file, she said. Not just now, but backwards. From year 1 to now. We built a review packet. 5 sections, housing history, child development, parental involvement, legal custody filings, and abandonment documentation. The packet read less like a sob story and more like a business case. Organized. Team estamped. Not emotionally colored. We requested that all hearings be in writing and pre-scheduled to accommodate my work hours. A court clerk admired our precision. At the hearing, my mother showed up calm and smiling, telling the judge she regretted distance and that Zara deserved to know her roots. But when asked to show evidence of any involvement in the last 3 years, financial, personal, emotional, she had none. Not a card. Not one visit. Nothing that reflected intention. Meanwhile, my file ran 73 pages long, cross-verified by shelter logs, pediatricians, case workers, and even the daycare supervisor. I didn't cry in court. I didn't raise my voice. I let the folder speak. The ruling came, request denied. Rights cannot be restored by sentiment. My mother left the building without looking back. Micheji exhaled. I didn't celebrate. He stood in the hall quietly and mentally checked the box labeled prepared. The fight had been quiet, lone, and always behind the scenes. But it had paid off. No emotional explosion. Used evidence. That's all courts ever need. And for me, it was no longer about winning. It was about shielding what they built. From the inside. Permanently. The weeks after the hearing were unusually still. No letters, no further attempts, no noise. I thought they'd feel relief, but instead I felt confirmation that I had done the hard thing the hardest way and come through intact. Sarah was entering her 4th year and repeating full sentences, drawing basic shapes, identifying colors. My parenting wasn't miraculous. It was methodical. He tracked everything, sleep regression notes, disciplinary methods, behavior trends. He met with her teachers regularly and submitted optional activity logs on time. There wasn't a single form I missed. We lived in a transitional studio now, applied for permanent housing, and received priority application confirmation. That confirmation got a folder of its own. My system was stronger than ever. I wasn't afraid anymore, not because I was fearless, but because they believed the lie that fear meant I was failing. It didn't. Fear only wins when it distracts. Meaning became fuel. Every night I reviewed 1 page of old logs to remind myself how far we had come, from a bench in January to our own locked door in the fall. I even taught Zara to identify important papers and put them in our safe box. She didn't know why that mattered. But Sanda, she would. My mother never reached out again after the denial. And I didn't need her to. Somewhere deep down, I had finally released the version of her I kept defending in my head. She made a choice. And I made mine, to let action, not anger, define the rest of my life. He had weathered institutional indifference, legal traps, and emotional storms without lashing out. Because once you survive the chaos, the most powerful thing you can do is stay calm and keep receipts. We moved into our own apartment 1 week before Sarah's 5th birthday. It was small but had real walls, a kitchen, and working locks. He watched her lay toys on the floor and name each room, even the closet became a castle fort. That night, I hung one framed photo of us on the wall, and under it, placed our safe box, organized documents, custody records, shelter intake scans, her birth certificate, and every page of what we've been through. Not for trauma. Not for pain. For history. For peace. Our new routine began quietly. He worked nights while she slept, applied for early childhood grants, and cooked real spaghetti for the first time in years. No applause. No grand finale. Used continuity. The kind that most people never question but that I fought for every hour of every day for 4 years. I don't carry bitterness. I carry systems. I don't share survival stories. I share methods. I don't need other people's belief in me to maintain what eBay created, because eBay done the one thing the system never expects a discarded daughter to do. eBay outlasted the abandonment without recreating it. Zara don't know yet what the shelter meant. EAJ explain it someday, when she's strong enough. But for now, all she knows is that mommy is steady, meals are warm, and bedtime always happens on time. eBay learned that being underestimated is a weapon if you know how to document everything. That being alone don't mean you're unfit. That silence, when paired with record keeping, beats noise every time. And so, as I hang our second photo frame on the wall, I don't think about who walked away. I think about who stayed. And the only person who needed to stay, stayed. Right here. That's all the evidence that matters now. Sometimes, the real victory is not letting yourself lose, even if the other person wins with a lie. If you've ever felt something like this, please let me know in the comments. I read every comment. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like. Don't forget to share it with someone close to you, they might need to hear it too. And if you want to hear more such real stories, subscribe to the channel. See you in the next story.